what has happened last night, an American Saudi attack on Iraqi forces, PMF, and popular mobilization, forces in Iraq. And this force is part of the Iraqi army, is not part of the Hashid or those those part of the resistance forces in Iraq. But the attack is somehow the attack on Iraqi government, is not an attack. And the reason they attacked Iraq, it was because of the drone attacks on oil facilities in Saudi Arabia. What is your understanding of the chaos that is happening between Saudi Arabia and Iraq and the attacks?
Well, we have now denials from Iraq and Iran that any drones actually or missiles were fired from Iraq on Saudi territory. Therefore, it seems like the Saudis and the Americans made up a story about an attack that never happened from Iraq on Saudi facilities to justify their aggression on Iraqi military. And the PMF, as you noted correctly, is part of the Iraqi military and is under the command of the Ministry of Defense of Iraq and the Prime Minister of Iraq. This is not Hezbollah, Iraq, or some other factions that are not part of the PMF. And so this is a direct attack on the Iraqi state and the Iraqi military. And I think maybe the Saudis are going to regret this, just like their attacks on Yemen that clearly were not in their interest. The attacks on Yemen and now the attacks on Iraq by the Saudi military are really not in the interests of the Saudi kingdom. They're only in the interests of the Jewish colony and the American occupation forces in the region. The Saudi regime finds itself being dragged into battles with its neighbors, direct war with its neighbors, where there was no war declaration between Iraq and the Saudi kingdom. And now it finds itself in this direct confrontation, all because the United States needs to light fires all around the region in hopes that internal chaos in countries in Western Asia will increase its chances in the confrontation with Iran. And I think yesterday's Iranian attacks on Jordan, which we will be probably talking about, probably came in on this sense that the Iranian state can see that the United States is preparing for more attacks and it's preempting them. So it's kind of right now both of the warring parties, the imperialist camp led by the United States and Jewish colony, and the axis of resistance are all preempting or damaging their opponent in this moment of supposed ceasefire. Without direct confrontation between Iran and the United States, the junior partners in these coalitions are now being targeted by the United States and, in this case, Iran.
Yeah, you've mentioned the case of Yemen, and there was no statement, because whenever they do such a thing, they attack a facility, they attack some locations in Saudi Arabia or other countries, they come out with a statement on their part explaining what was the main reason of this attack, and we haven't seen that from the PMF. And basically, yesterday they announced there was a statement mentioning that it wasn't an attack on their part. They didn't attack Saudi Arabia, but nonetheless, you see Saudi Arabia after all attacking them. And do you think that attack has happened, or it was somehow a mixture of those attacks that Yemen implemented on Saudi Arabia? They wanted to come out with, they're attacking us, we have to respond, because nobody was, taking responsibility for the latest attack on Saudi Arabia. I don't know if that happened, and when the drones were used from Yemen or from Iraq. What is your understanding of that?
Over the last 3 years, everybody knows that the Axis of Resistance members are very proud of their actions. And whenever they conduct an attack on an imperialist or a Zionist force, they announce it as it happens and after the fact with more details on what were the results of this attack. Similarly, whenever there is any injuries or martyrs within the forces of the Axis of Resistance, the Axis of Resistance members are very proud about announcing them and not hiding their losses. On the other hand, we also have seen the Imperialist Alliance and the Zionist camp. Whenever they are attacked, they release statements about it and videos to try to get the audience on their side. They show the damage. At least they condemn once that happens, they condemn the Axis of Resistance member that did that attack. Well, in this situation, we have denials from Iraq, denials from Yemen, denials from Iran that there was an attack on the Saudi territory by Iraqi forces. Therefore, and we don't have any videos from Saudi territory that show us any damage, or these missiles or these drones hitting their targets. And of course, there's thousands and millions of Saudi citizens that are filming every attack as we see and putting it out on social media. So none of those things exist. So I would definitely believe the statements of the PMF and the Iranian state that clearly indicate there was never any attack on Saudi territory coming from Iraq. There was none that came from Yemen. Yemen announced the actual targets that it hit that are related to the oil industry of the Saudi regime and didn't hide it. Why would Yemen, let's say, hide any other attacks? And therefore, it is clear that there has never been an attack and that this was a made-up story, all to give media justification for this attack, this unprovoked, unlawful attack by the Saudi regime and the American forces on a part of the Ministry of Defense and the armed forces of Iraq, the official armed forces of Iraq, that is the Popular Mobilization Forces.
Do you expect Iraq responding to what has happened, or maybe they're not gonna respond officially? They're gonna let the parts of the acts of resistance responding to the the Saudi American attack on their soil.
The PMF is saying there's around 70 martyrs in those official headquarters that were attacked. This is again
20,
not like
20 Laith.
Sorry, 20 and maybe around 70 injured. I'm sorry, I'm
70.
Yeah.
Injured. So, you mean the injured casualties?
Yeah, injured and martyred together is around 70 casualties.
Okay.
Thank you for correcting me there. Look, right now Iraq has a prime minister and a president that are vassals of the United States. Similar situation to Lebanon. Otherwise, the prime minister should have ordered the Air Force of Iraq, which is very advanced, in looking around the region. The Air Force of Iraq has been updated by the Americans. So why did the Air Force of Iraq didn't go up in the air and try to stop attacks on its own territory? And that is only because the prime minister is a puppet, and so is the president of Iraq. So I do not expect the Iraqi government to retaliate to these attacks on its territory. There has been back and forth attacks on the territory of Iraq for years now, and maybe if we go back even decades, and this military of Iraq is not doing anything. This was the reason the Popular Mobilization Forces were founded, to defend Iraq from ISIS and other attacks, and eventually the PMF were absorbed into the Iraqi army. So two things could be happening right now. The leadership of the PMF could be looking to get revenge for these casualties, but how will the Iraqi prime minister respond? Will he try to stop the PMF from retaliating? Therefore, it is more likely that resistance groups that are outside the PMF inside Iraq, like Hezbollah Iraq, will retaliate on behalf of the PMF. All of these things indicate, of course, that the Americans are trying to create internal chaos in Iraq, to have a confrontation between the government of Iraq and the resistance forces on the ground, because as the United States is unable to achieve anything itself in its fight against Hezbollah Iraq and other factions like that, and wants to have this kind of a civil war situation in Iraq, where the axis of resistance members in Iraq will be distracted with internal conflict, so they wouldn't be able to join in the defense of Lebanon and Palestine and Yemen and Iran. So this is the overall objective of the United States in all of the Western Asian battlefields outside Iran, in Iraq, in Yemen, and in Lebanon. Their priority right now of the United States is to, even if they cannot defeat the axis of resistance members in these countries, to create enough chaos and internal strife in these countries that the majority of the firepower of these axis of resistance members will be directed inwards and unable to add to or change the balance of power in the region.
Here is Laith. The Iraqi Harakat Hezbollah al-Nujaba has released a statement in which says that we condemn the U.S.-Saudi aggression against Iraq and accuse Washington of violating country's sovereignty while targeting Iraqi cities. We call on Iraqi government to expel U.S. forces and end cooperation with Saudi Arabia and strengthen Iraq's air defense and hold accountable those responsible for facilitating the attacks. We affirm that Iraq's sovereignty will not be violated without consequences and vow that those responsible will pay the price while honoring the movement, the moments, of the martyrdom. And here is the response. I think, Laith, Saudi Arabia has a lot to lose in this fight that they have started, as you've mentioned. They started attacking Yemen, and right now Yemen is putting a blockade on them. They're asking, Reuters reported today that they're gonna have a new mechanism in the bubble mandate, a new mechanism for the toll, and they're gonna charge toll whoever wants to use the bubble mandate. Not only that, they can respond to Saudi Arabia attacking their oil facilities, and we know the air defense systems in Saudi Arabia, they're not working properly. And CNN today reported that the United States is short of interceptors and missiles. That is so important for the ongoing fight. The other point is, if Iraq decides to attack them, basically they have drones in Iraq and Yemen has drones and missiles. A combination of both would be devastating for Saudi Arabia. How do you see, or do you think are they going to come to some sort of sanity, or they're going to continue on these escalations?
Sometimes it's hard for people to recognize that although the United States controls these countries and makes money out of the oil and gas, in the end, the United States doesn't care if the oil fields of the Saudi regime burn, because the United States wants to position itself as the number one exporter of oil and gas, specifically to markets that it's competing with Russia on, European markets and East Asian markets. So, and an increase in oil prices in that situation, which leaves just Russia and the United States as the main exporters, would benefit the American regime with billions of dollars, right? So on the one hand, we see the Saudi regime and the other Gulf regimes that are vassals, doing things that look like suicidal, and we wonder, why are they doing these things? Don't they understand that their own oil and gas is not going to be exported? Well, in the end, they are just vassals, and the United States
Wait,
is fine.
sorry for interrupting you. When you say the United States is going to benefit from that, I think that you mean the oligarchs in the United States, because the people, the ordinary people, they're not going to benefit from that.
Yes, definitely. The oil magnates and the regime in the United States that is taking cuts from all the deals. Obviously, Trump and his family are enriching themselves immensely over the last few months, but now they're going to do it even more. So we will see that same, oil and gas barons like the Halliburtons and ExxonMobil and so forth, all of them reaping billions of dollars in minutes if the prices keep on going up, and if the other competitors to their export, meaning mainly the Gulf or Arabian Peninsula monarchies, they will benefit if those monarchies stop exporting. So there's a game on the one hand, and I think this is why Iran and China are trying very hard not to get the oil prices to explode, because everybody in the world, on the planet, is going to be harmed except the United States as a regime. Yes, the population in the United States will be harmed if the prices keep on going up, but the rising prices will enrich that elite in the United States that have been pushing for these wars. Now, when we look at the shortages that the United States is facing, that you mentioned, of anti-air defense systems and munitions in general, that are very dependent on the magnets and other metals and so forth, precious metals that China has now limited. This is actually adds to this idea. If the United States is not able to fight this war because it has shortages, and it already knows that it lost 2 rounds of this war against Iran, well, what is the options in front of it to continue to weaken its competitors around the world, or to benefit more from this chaotic situation? And that's when we fall down to this idea that the US wants actually these Gulf vassals to commit suicide, to drag themselves into wars that they will suffer from, and their exports of oil and gas will be at shortage. And then specifically China will be more and more dependent on Russian and Iranian oil. And as we see, the US is increasing the heat on Russia and on Iran. So who knows what backup does China have if the shortages of oil and gas continue to rise. So, and then we put that in this picture of, you mentioned the Bab el-Mandeb. And again, we see that the US is actually provoking Yemen to get to this point of blockading Bab el-Mandeb and starting a toll on it. So in a way, there's multiple ways that the US can benefit from this situation, even when it's losing the war directly.
Yeah. Here is another faction in Iraq. Saraya Auliya al-Dam has issued a statement demanding that Iraq sever diplomatic and economic relations with Saudi Arabia and expel the Saudi ambassador. The statement called on the government to review the recent agreements with the United States and cancel the planned visit to the Hejaz. This is new for the Iraqi government. The guy is the prime minister. Was elected just weeks ago. This is something new for him. He went to the United States, then he went to Iran, he went to Turkey, and he tried to, play a political game. And right now he's in the middle of some sort of chaos happening in Iraq, and he cannot ignore the attack. The problem is that he cannot ignore it, and these people are putting pressure on him. How do you feel, Laith, that the United States was somehow trying to make some sort of division within Iraq, disarmament of the acts of resistance in Iraq and Hezbollah, and right now these attacks are somehow unifying the country and putting pressure on the prime minister of Iraq?
Some of those attacks last night in Iraq were on Karbala. This is the holy city where, the tomb of Hussein is, and near it is the tomb of Ali, of course, in Najaf. So this was a religious provocation. And the reason that Saraya Alwiyat al-Dam is mentioning the trip to Hijaz of the prime minister is because the holy sites in Iraq have been attacked, and now you're going to go and do pilgrimage to Hijaz that is safe and nobody attacks it and so forth. So I think this is part of the idea that the Saudis and the Americans have, is to create religious strife in Iraq. And when we see these Shia militias speaking about Karbala and the damage to Karbala and the attacks on Karbala, and then putting it in the context of what is happening in the Hajj and Hijaz and so forth, this is already indicating that maybe we will see now a rise of a new kind of ISIS or so forth that the Americans and the Saudis may be planning. I'm not too worried about that, by the way, because the vast majority of Wahhabi death squads mercenaries around the world have been, slaughtered in Syria and or now have been dispersed by the Turkish regime to other conflict regions in Africa specifically to continue destabilizing regions like the Sahel and the Horn of Africa. So there's not much that the Saudis can do in terms of bringing, sorry about that, foreign Wahhabi death squads, but they can be paying off people that are Iraqi to try to create militias. But they will have, I think, not much luck, especially that the Kurdish militias are very busy right now defending their territory, and the fact that Iran is pounding them almost on a daily basis. So I don't know how far the Saudis and the Americans think that they can drive a wedge within the society in Iraq. The prime minister of Iraq right now is on kind of notice by the resistance forces in the country that he should be trying to get the retaliation on behalf of the population. And if he doesn't work on that, if he doesn't get the armed forces of Iraq to officially retaliate, they will be retaliating. And that's what the United States wants. The United States wants actually that the Iraqi government starts to have a confrontation with the resistance forces, and partially this was the plan with this attack.